quick thought today whilst it is swimming in the forefront of my mind, and it's around space holding, chairing, leading, coordinating, being someone who is directing conversation with a group. And something that's interesting but also has an impact on the direction of travel of how group dynamics unfold, and also whether or not the objective of the intended discussion actually reaches its goal successfully in a way that allows everyone in the space to be heard and also to feel supported and included. And no one said that holding a space that has principles of safety is easy. But one thing that I think is often shied away from by people that are in a kind of space holding or facilitation role out of fear of or self-consciousness of not wanting to come across as too dominant or too assertive or dictatorial, or any of these kind of qualities that could be misinterpretations, in fact, of your professionalism or willingness to show up in an assertive way that kind of sets the tone and lays foundations and actually says, this is what we're here to do. This is the remit of the space. This is what it is, and this is what it isn't. So maybe making some statements and clarity around what support is or is not available in the space. So, for example, touching on sensitive subject material, but maybe the conversation not being a space that actually explores that or offers therapeutic support. It's really important to make that clear and make that known. That's where signposting and like the safeguarding piece around that can come into play, because it's not like you're leaving people high and dry and be like, okay, we're going to open this box and chat about something that's kind of potentially difficult, and then off you go, see you later, good luck kind of thing. So that is something that is still extending a duty of care, but is not, it's not overstretching capacity or stepping outside of scope if that's not actually the role of the space or the space holder to be offering that kind or level of complex support. And another thing that I think is really useful, and I've taken this away as a key learning from a recent training that was facilitated by Lisa Hayes, who is an excellent facilitator, and she spoke about positionality and actually naming that, being transparent about that and clear about that. And that was described really in relation to trauma-informed practice, but also the nature of that work was kind of in the realms of EMDR, which is a therapeutic intervention. But actually, if we're talking about bringing in a trauma-informed approach to, everything we do and building towards a world that is trauma-informed or like accommodates the reality that actually people that we're interfacing with every day have complex needs and backgrounds and things that are shaping and influencing the way that they show up in spaces, and therefore a statement of positionality of someone who's actually holding the space is really, really helpful, because it kind of sets the context for who that person is and what they're about, and maybe gives them the opportunity to contextualize some lived experience that is pertinent to the subject matter. Also, in the context that was being discussed, that was kind of referring to an anti-oppressive way of working, and it is my hope that that is going to be language that is not clunky at some point, that that's just going to be part of the way that everybody is practicing and doing things. But not every space is operating using that kind of terminology, or, we're still in this kind of EDI, equalities and inclusion sort of landscape, and still kind of navigating presentation and discussion with this kind of structure, at least in like the UK context. So with that being said, the statement of positionality thing feels so helpful, because it kind of, depending on who the group is and what the context is, the depth of that contextual information may shift and change, depending on what the accessibility needs of that group are, or whether it is an educational presentation, or whether it is a community group, or whether it is like a discussion to resolve a challenge or problem solve on something at a community level, and whether it is a meeting with stakeholders. Like, the language shifts and change to accommodate and reflect that, but also it's part of the same breath almost of like opening the space and saying who you are and what you do and why we're here and what's going on and what the scope is, and if there's an agenda, and also setting then some ground rules, or setting some like markers around what the boundaries of the space are. And that is simply in the sense that without boundaries in a space, especially if subject matter has the potential to be challenging or triggering, it can be a completely unconscious process or experience for a contributor who is impacted by something or who has lived experience with something to share a perspective or an insight or an anecdote or story, and to share that without the kind of cognizance of, or the preemptive understanding that those words may have impact and they may affect someone else in a negative way. And just because the context of a space that explicitly states that it's going to discuss challenging subject matter, just because everyone is aware of that does not mean that there is kind of permission explicitly given to be exposed to a certain presentation of information. So it's not about then creating boundaries to control the flow of what is said, rather that they are kind of guide rails to support everyone in the space who may be coming from, different experiences of certain things, but also that have different capacities when it comes to self-regulation, that have that are at different stages on their personal development journey, or maybe even therapeutic journey if it's pertaining to something that has impacted, mental health, emotional well-being. And all of those complexities then, for me, make it feel even more important as a space holder to actually step into what may initially feel a bit uncomfortable or a bit awkward, or a bit like, oh, right, okay, I'm asserting something here by saying, like, let's share in the space in a way that is of service to everyone and is considerate of everyone, so just inviting there to be a spirit of sharing that is in service to the community or the purpose of what the discussion is around. And just like setting some parameters and boundaries around that as well, because everybody, as I say, comes from a different perspective and background, and people have different communication styles as well. And in order to honor and respect those, but also to create a kind of communication space that actually feels inclusive, it is good to have some shared agreement on like guiding principles for that, so that people have a kind of an anchor point or something to to lean on or rest on, so that it's the space then feels invitational to contribute. And also it's more likely within that kind of dynamic that there's going to be a balance in terms of the representation of voices, because everybody is coming from this common shared understanding of this is how we intend to navigate the dialogue going forward, and actually getting consent from everyone. Like, does everyone agree to that? Does everyone understand that? And like, maybe there are like principles that are in place that are inherently connected to the space in which the meeting's taking place, or whether it's an organization or they have their own kind of framework. But then not only that, but inviting that contribution in real time from others to say, is there anything to be added to that? Because sometimes that is the door that opens the conversation for someone that maybe would not have contributed in a way that their voice or opinion or perspective would have had room to be explored, because there has been an additional infrastructural aspect that's been put in place early on that is actually starting from kind of quite a vulnerable space, if you like, to say, like, does anyone want to come in here? And because it's still in that sort of early stage, kind of almost like icebreaker stage, that can also be points where somebody in the space might disclose, oh, trauma impacted, or like, this is particularly challenging for me, or whatever, just something that helps guide and indicate to other people in the room, in order for me to feel supported and safe going forward, this is helpful. Or this is the point at which somebody says, oh, I'm neurodivergent, or I've got a hearing impairment, and it would be really helpful, for people to speak slowly. And that is something that I've seen modelled and used in various events that I've attended recently, which has been really, really nice to see. But why does it have to be limited to a large scale formal event? Like, we can still take these principles of best practice and pull them into everyday conversations, and it just makes things a lot easier. It makes things there's an element of formality to it, because there's a kind of a logical flow of how these things kind of unfold. But when they become part of your way of doing things, it doesn't feel clunky. In fact, it feels quite normal. It's almost like warming up and priming the space to actually get to the point of like, okay, let's proceed with the difficult conversation or whatever it is that needs to be explored. So yeah, there are so many different approaches to this, and different techniques, and yeah, I'd be really interested to hear from those of you working either in community spaces or in like policy change contexts, just, anyone that is immersed in this work or active in trying to kind of model these things, what you found particularly helpful or useful, a great opportunity to signpost to other people if there are tools, resources, exercises that kind of speak to this that you would like to make other people aware of. You never know who is watching these videos, and yeah, just that opportunity there in the comments to add to the conversation and offer a contribution to that if you have anything that you want to spotlight or any facilitators that you want to spotlight and to make us aware of. Yeah, always really keen to hear from you, and yeah, have a good weekend, everyone. And if you are enjoying the sunshine, be careful. I definitely got caught yesterday. So yeah, take care and look after yourselves this weekend.